we'd been losing people like crazy. Dad died in 2002, and Uncle Dick in 2003, and then G in 2004, and then Aunt Mary. And so when Aunt Mary died and we started cleaning out her house, it was broken into 3 times before her funeral. And Sally kind of single-handedly got all this stuff out of her house, and I guess none of the pictures were stolen. But all of a sudden we had all these pictures and boxes of stuff. And we started going through them, and
No, we didn't. Sue. The cousins would have burned everything.
Yeah,
If
they
had
started
been in
a
charge.
bonfire at Aunt Mary's house, and they were just throwing stuff out in front of the fire. They were having a great time. So I've got 6 or 7 bins this size at my house. And there would have been another bin of all of, see, our Aunt Mary taught PE at Anacortes High School between 1955 and 1977. So she had, what?
8. She graduated in 78. I mean, she retired.
She had a high school annual for each one of those years, plus all of the years that her family was in school. But she had all these high school annuals. And do you know how heavy 20 high school annuals are? So Patrick, this is my husband Patrick, and we would crate those from room to room. What are we going to do with these books? You know, stacked this high school annuals. And we carry 5 at a time, put them in this room. And so I thought, I'm just going to put them in the dumpster, or I'm just going to take them to Goodwill, or I'm just going to, and I never did. And then I stopped in at the museum over town one day, and I was talking to Brett Lunsford about, I can't remember why I went there, but I said, what all do you have on the Stapps? So he got in this file folder, and he got this little skinny folder that had a picture of my granddad and a little thing written about him. I thought,
We can fix that. We have 6 bins.
So then I started,
The annuals.
and then about the same time went and told Sally that he wanted to hear more about the Stapps.
Oh, yeah.
So when Mom was head of the Women's Society, or she was in charge of programs for the Women's Society, she asked Dad,
On Wednesdays.
yeah, the quilting group, she asked Aunt Sylvia and Aunt Mary and Dad and Uncle Dick to do a program of growing up here. That was in 1987. And someone taped it, and we found the tape. Well, they did it again. They did it again in 1992, 5 years later. And so we had 2 tapes. So Sally took one,
The
and
long
I took
one.
and we went start, stop, start, stop. It took forever. And so what we came up with, I think the one Sally did was
10,000 words.
97 pages long,
No,
or
not
27
97.
pages long, and the one I did was like 17 pages long.
You
So
don't
we
have to read
those,
it.
yeah. So when we first thought about doing this, we thought, well, we can't just play the tapes, because they're kind of hard to hear. And in one of them, there was a baby crying the whole time. So
We want to know who that kid is.
That kid is a pig.
Yeah, I know. I knew too.
So that was from 1992. And in 1987, Aunt Sylvia was just about to turn 80. So, time was getting short on these talks. And so Mom had this wonderful idea to do that. And Aunt Sylvia had gone through some of the picture albums and had about maybe 5 or 6 pictures that she showed during the talk. And her big thing was what everybody wore back in those days. And wait till you see the pictures. Everybody can see them. Who died? Mom's the last one that we have. She said, I've got to start writing down what I know. So on the Alversons camping tracks, the Stapps bought lot 12 in 1923. And then later, Dad bought the one across the street, and that's where Mom and Dad lived for 30 years after Dad retired. So Mom started writing things down, and Sally had this idea that everybody on North Beach should write something about their cabin.
Before it was ripped down and built into a mansion.
Yeah. So our friend Susan Briggs kept getting on the McCormicks, who grew up, Jerry McCormick grew up on the beach too. And so Susan kept saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. And so finally she said, you guys be the rememberers, I'll be the typer. And she typed it up. And it's really interesting.
Yeah.
They have lots of memories of, they had 3 boys the same age as the McCracken boys, and they grew up together on the beach. But this other neat thing they have is this little pamphlet, and I don't know what year it's from, but it's advertising these, the way the, all that land
He knows a lot.
If I knew a lot, I'd be sitting back there.
So after we typed up the tapes, we didn't really know how we would do it. We didn't want to stand up here and read them. So I said, well, what if we try to find a bunch of pictures that kind of illustrate what the four talked about. So that's what we did, and we have pictures and kind of a little script. And so, when pictures are ready, unless you guys want to do it some different way. Can you think of something better?
Oh, I think it sounds great.
Well, it would be so nice if we could take, if you could see the pictures, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I can show you this screen.
Do you have, Sally, you have them in your computer?
They're in my computer right now.
Are they on a disk or a thumb drive?
They're on a disc.
Well then,
You should be able to go through that.
that's what we should do.
Did you put the disc
You have to use the mouse to
Yeah,
control
that's
it.
okay. Or I can use the other keyboard. I don't have to use my keyboard.
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
just before we.
Off the train.
Wow.
Well, we don't know. When your
Yeah.
pictures taken.
Yeah, right.
We kind of,
Why don't, for now, we just hold the, put the picture up there
Oh, okay.
and you can explain it. They're still,
Just a minute. Off my
I think
computer.
they're gonna get it.
you do? Well,
One through this. Usually
So the,
Can you reject the disk?
yeah.
Okay, here's a funny story, since we have Lewis here, this is a funny story. When we were little children, my grandmother was always telling us not to run around with sticks in our mouth. And, that's what you don't want your child to do, but this is why. This is Uncle Dick talking on one of the tapes. And they were talking about the road, and so Uncle Dick says, I don't remember the origin of that road myself, seeing how I arrived on the scene in 1919. I can vaguely remember being towed across the island in that coaster wagon that Aunt Sylvia talked a lot about on the tape. First recollection I have of being on Guemes, because I can remember having an annoying little sister at the time when I was 3, and I had to walk while she got to ride in the wagon. As far as that road was concerned, it was nothing more than a cow path, and as long as I can remember, there was always a road from the ferry to North Beach, but it went along the beach instead of where it is now. So, let's see, let's see.
This one here is just.
I remember running down there with a stick in my mouth, stumbling and falling and hurting my throat. Doc Shaw happened to be on the scene that summer and I was saved. And then Dad, Stappy, said, yeah, he ruined our whole summer. We had to take him home because he injured his throat so badly with a stick in his mouth. So that's why Grandmother always told us not to run with a stick in our mouth. But Dr. Shaw seemed like he was always there. When someone
So where
had
was this place?
Right next to Bob Weatherly.
Okay.
that big house, white house. that
Oh,
kind of
okay.
lived
He
in.
bought our cabin from Bob's dad.
No audio.
So how did the road go along the beach? Because there's a cliff there.
On North Beach.
on North Beach, yeah.
Oh, on North Beach, where it comes around the curve down at the bottom, where Ashbacks live. Instead of going where it is, it went down along the beach. And Dad explains on the tape that the beach used to be 50 feet wider than it is. And so there was a road, and at Everett's it started going up then. And so we think in the late 20s maybe they started putting the road, making the road would get bumpy, and every couple of years he'd go over.
Every year you did
Every year?
that. Every year you did.
Do you remember when he had a gas pump in front of his house?
Yes.
And then we had negatives that were about this big, up to about this big. We have a stack of negatives this big. That I chose, $3.50 to get those. And then it was also on the CD. So last night we were looking at them, and Sal blew it up. And this is a person behind Granddad leaning over. I'll pass it on so you can see it. And she's wearing a really funny hat. You'll see pictures of her. But until we could see it big, we didn't know what it was.
No.
underwear. I want you to stand there and hold, or I'll hold it up, but I don't know how to make. Our grandmother went to a normal school in Macomb, Illinois, and she was the basketball star. This is a picture of our grandmother in the middle. And I think she went to normal school for 2 years maybe, then she taught, I think, just maybe for a year before she married my granddad. They got married in 1906 on Memorial Day. So this woman up in the corner, her name is Pansy Green from Moline. And she was our grandmother's best friend.
Basketball players.
Yeah. So when our grandparents arrived here in April of 1913, grandmother was pregnant. That long train trip pregnant. And so our little, the third child, Tommy, was born in August. And the next year, in 1914, Pansy Green came out to visit. And I was so interested that she would come all that way, you know, a single woman, supposedly. But then we found, I don't know how many of you know Claudia Lohman. She does lots of research on her family. And when she'd be going through these old papers, every time she found something about Stapps, she would make a copy of it and send it to me. So there was this little article that's talking about Mr. and Mrs. Dan Henderson or something. Came for a 3-week visit to Anacortes to visit the Stapps. And it said when they went home again, the Stapps went up to Vancouver and, you know, until they traveled with them until they got on the train. So I got to thinking, I wonder if Mrs. Dan Harrison was Pansy Green from Moline. You know, Mrs. Dan Harrison isn't as interesting as Pansy Green from Moline, but they could have been the same person, you know?
Yeah.
So when you do this history stuff, I'm learning. You never really know what you have.
Sue, I think one thing, when the people took off and Haley's Comet was there in 1910, and grandmother said that everyone was so interested in the comet they paid no attention to the fact that they had a young baby boy.
Somebody hold on to that.
So some things were more important.
Yeah.
Sylvia and Dad at the Anacortes, at the depot.
Should I go with the script, or are you just going to talk?
You have to refresh
Hit
it.
Can you see that? If the light was off, should the lights be up?
Just hit one of the keys.
Brightness.
Oh, no, wait. No, it's just because it's not plugged in. Wait, I'll plug it in.
No, it just needs to
Yeah,
be.
that's good.
Just needs to be updated. Yeah, refresh. There you
And
go.
now it's lighter.
Yeah, you just have to refresh it once in a while.
So I'm assuming this is the Anacortes train station. It looks like it to me. Maybe all train stations looked alike. I don't know. That could have been when they left. You think that is Anacortes?
Well, they used the same design
For all
for
train
dozens of train stations.
Oh.
They just made them a little bigger, a little smaller, because there's duplicates of this train station all across the.
Oh. Well, that could be the day that they left Macomb, Illinois. Or it could be,
Or it could be when they got here.
Yeah. Because Dad is pretty young. Okay, so here, should we go to the script? Okay. Okay, so Charles convinced, Ralph Stapp, Granddad's younger brother, convinced Charles to bring his family to Anacortes. So this is a picture of Ralph holding Louise, because not only did our grandmother have a baby in 1913, so did the other Mrs. Stapp. So Louise and Tommy were born the same year. So that's Ralph holding Louise, and the next picture is Granddad holding little Tom. They're not very interesting, but I thought it was. Okay. The shoe store was located in a building owned by the Wells family at 408 Commercial Avenue. And I was surprised, yeah, those are pictures of the shoe store. Those were on one of the negatives. And a long time ago, I was looking at the negatives, and I thought, could that be Granddad's shoe store? And I was thrilled, to get pictures of it. But we don't know how old it is, because it looks like there's a cement sidewalk instead of a boardwalk. Lewis can research that.
You're in the way.
So Aunt Sylvia talked a lot about how, because she was the oldest child, and so she has had the best memories, I think, from when they first arrived. She said that Granddad and Uncle Ralph worked so hard in the shoe store all week that Sundays were the day that they went exploring. And our Granddad loved to know what was going on, and he loved to show his little children wonderful things, so they explored a lot. And, well, that's true, so we're past that now, Sam. Okay. So, and they didn't have a car, so they did lots of walking. And one thing they did was walk out the pipeline, and on the tape they kind of explained what that was. That's how Anacortes got its water. And I saw these pictures, and I thought, maybe that's the pipeline.
They went to 32nd Street from 8th and I, or 10th and H.
Do you have any idea what year this is?
Oh, yeah.
That's 1914.
Before, yeah.
1914.
Okay, well, that would still be a local water system then.
So when did the water system go to Heart Lake?
Well, I mean, it's not from the river, it's not from Stapp.
Oh, so that
No,
was
but-
a local water system.
But it went out to 32nd Street. They walked all the way from downtown out to 32nd along this pipeline.
Yeah, well,
And Aunt Mary said that's now Heart Lake Road.
I don't.
No, Lake Erie Road, she said.
Just went dark.
Local pipeline instead of
Oh,
I'm going to send you this disc. So.
well, I don't even
Okay,
know if,
thanks.
oh, so there's
Okay,
another picture
keep going.
of little Tom on the pipeline. So keep going, Sal.
A boardwalk. There's kind of a
Okay,
boardwalk.
so then, look at this, all five, the two mothers and the
better.
Yeah,
three
that's
children, the four children, are sitting on two huge stumps. And you can see what they're wearing, look what they're wearing. White.
White iron.
stockings,
White iron things.
And so another thing they like to do is go down to the water and see the beach, because remember they're from Illinois. And they love to ride the ferry. So they would push the baby in that little basket, they called it an Oriole basket. Pushed it down to the ferry. And they would take their lunch in the coaster wagon.
That was strictly a walking road, there was no transportation on the island?
Well, they only went to South Beach. They'd go on the ferry and they would stay right there and play on that beach. Yeah, because they didn't know anything about North Beach yet. So riding the ferry to South Beach became a common excursion, dressing up for the occasion with hats, ties, vests, bows, long coats, white stockings, and iron dresses.
They do all have hats on. It's just ridiculous.
There are better pictures. Go
Yeah,
after that.
yeah. This is quite awkward, but I'm doing a good job, aren't I?
Yes.
So what's that one of? I can't see. Oh, that's the coaster wagon. Okay, keep going. See, we tried to follow what the four were talking about on their tapes, and so.
But this is
Okay,
good. You can really see
Yeah,
that.
that's a really good picture. That's of granddad and grandmother, and granddad's holding our dad Stappy, and grandmother's holding Aunt Sylvia, and the little Tom in the middle. But look at grandmother's hat with that thing sticking out.
Is
So
that Jack
what-
Island in the background there?
I think that might have been Hat Island.
How do you-
So
how
when
do you
I
make it
picked
up?
that picture up from Omega Photo, the guy goes, "We just don't wear hats enough anymore, do we?"
Well, and mostly they didn't buy their North Beach house the property till 1924, so these are all South Beach.
Yeah.
They would just come over on Sunday for picnics,
Mhm.
dressed up like that, and to go agate hunting.
And so then,
We should revive that.
keep going.
Yeah.
So there's just another picture of the whole group, and they're all dressed up and,
White clothes.
taking the babies to the beach and everything, because that's what they did on Sundays in the picnic. And look at that one.
Look at
If you can
that.
see the bows in Aunt Sylvia's hair, it's a bow about this big. We had
They
more.
brought the dog.
Sailor cats.
Yeah. Okay.
So keep going. Okay, there's a picture of Granddad. We thought it was golf clubs behind him, but it's not, it's pansy green. So you keep going.
What kind of ferry were they taking?
It was,
Is there a picture of that?
Dad said he was kind of fuzzy on that. He said he remembers that Bill Beesner had a 6-car ferry, and it had
This is
passenger
way before that.
passenger things on each side. And he said that Bill wanted to get more cars on the ferry, so he eliminated one of the passenger cabins so he could squeeze 2 more cars on.
Seems like this would be before then.
Yeah.
I don't know the time frame that Bill Beesner owned it. Anybody? Does
We
it-
should have had Bill come.
Yeah,
This is my
we do.
grandmother. Why is it way back to here?
Okay, oh, and then I just said because that's pansy green. I'll
So
say,
yeah, so this is my grandmother's basketball team.
Oh, that's what that is.
Yeah, and
I
they're in a
see the
basketball.
at the
Yeah,
normal school.
she was
And
good.
so the woman up in the
Upper
on that
left.
side, yeah, is Pansy Green from Moline, and she came to visit the second summer that they were here.
And this is the Mr. and Mrs. Dan Harrington visiting.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the Beachcomber always had little
There's
articles.
Pansy Green from Moline. On the beach with her big hat, long white dress, coat.
Fancy.
Yeah.
She's
Your
from the
grandmother?
east. Huh?
Who is that?
She's my grandmother's best friend and basketball player star,
Teammate.
probably forward.
Yeah.
She was
And she
golf-
came all the way out from Illinois to visit.
But they stayed 2 weeks.
3 weeks,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, 3 weeks.
If that's.
Okay, and there she is. She's taken off her coat, but she's looking for agates. White dress. Get it.
Oh, she's like, she's got a rooster coat.
Yeah.
And see, our grandmother was born in 1884, so Pansy probably was too. And there she is, the little Tom on the beach.
Plain. Are these getting darker?
And then in the tape,
That's
Aunt Sylvia made a big deal about how Louise, his cousin, was always teasing little Tom. So there they are fighting over stuff. Okay, then I said, visitors to the Stapps might also have enjoyed, have been treated to July 4th boat races. So start with boat races.
But look at, these are Indian canoes.
Canoes, yeah.
So somebody's gonna need this.
And that
And
is
so,
Guemes,
and
Yeah,
here's the picture.
yeah.
Kingston Heights.
I just
Oh,
knew
yeah,
they were in
yeah,
the
yeah.
water, so we blew them up, and they turned
It's
out
your
to be.
place. Yeah, my
Indian.
place.
Wow.
Right.
And if I had 3 more hands, I could zoom in on some of those for you.
Okay, so that's where the Passarellis live, right up there.
Ah, cool.
Yeah,
That's true.
and all these
That's where
pictures
the
on the back
O'Donnells
said
live.
July 4th, so I think I read that they used to have boat races on July 4th.
Some year. Scars boat, maybe.
Maybe. I
Two
haven't,
stacks.
I haven't, you know, you can zoom in, just control plus.
It said Lickenbach Line. I'm gonna Google that and see what kind of a boat it was.
Oh, now see, Steve is here and this
Oh,
is his
goodness.
computer, so he would know how to do it. Too bad. So I don't know what this means. Okay.
Is that the Preston? Look at that boat, that's that paddle wheel boat that's
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there.
that's
Oh, that's the
Prescott.
Preston?
The Prescott. Wow.
Preston?
Preston.
Yeah, Preston.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it would be one of the earlier boats. 'cause
No, it's not the Preston.
It's not
Oh, it's not the Preston, it's a paddle wheeler. We
Well,
have
it could be
Yes.
one of them.
It's the
It's
corner house.
17,
Is that where Barman Larson lives
Right.
No,
Lewis
across the
knows who it
street.
is.
It's across the street.
Susan.
It was on a tour one time.
Yeah, that house
Always
was-
go if you get a
It
tour.
was really, it's such a beautiful house.
Look at
And
the
the house
gingerbread on the
And-
peak.
Yeah, I think it's still
Judge.
there. It's still like that. They've done a lot of fancy entryway-like things.
And
I
then the
think,
house
did they
behind,
lose that house during the Depression?
Yes.
And that's why they had to go to Port Angeles for a
Yes,
year?
I think.
But they didn't give up the
shoe
Guemes house.
store was-
The big house, get rid of it. The tent platform on Guemes, keep it. That's a cool house, you should go look at it. And this is an interior shot?
yeah, and Granddad, this is interesting on the back of the little tiny picture. It says, Granddad wrote this. This is our dining room. I took the picture and gave it a 50-minute exposure under an electric light. It was taken at night. Notice Aunt Lib's candlesticks.
Up on the mantle there.
Yeah, notice them.
Somewhere.
On the mantle.
Yeah, right there,
This
right.
doesn't have a
Well, I
date.
don't need another hand. Okay.
I saw it maybe one of our Yeah, I think someone was in the upstairs bedroom and they took a picture of the kids outside. And that's where we zoomed in on that, the looking block line.
Lincoln Bob or something.
And I thought that was also interesting because the sidewalks are boards
Ah.
in the walkway. That's Aunt Sylvia standing about the same place.
Okay? Am I going not quite fast enough?
Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
There's a little white.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now this is really cute. Turn that around and read it. Our granddad in 1923 was appointed postmaster of Anacortes. And I mean, there are letters from the White House, it says on the envelope, and the guy that appointed him and all that stuff. It's kind of fun. But then Charlie Gant wrote this about when he was appointed, right?
Postmaster Charles P. Stapp sounds good, looks good, and is good. Inasmuch as a change was inevitable, we know of no better choice for the position of postmaster. Mr. Stapp is a good citizen, and able and honorable businessman, and God forgive him, a Republican that knows no other party. Outside of that, he's an all-wool American citizen standing 4 square to the world. If he makes as an efficient a postmaster as did his predecessor, why, life will float by like a song. Charlie Gant. It was Saturday, October 6, 1923.
Guemes Island newspaper called the Beachcomber or the Telecom or something. And it was just in an envelope. It's a little, worn out newspaper.
And our cousins would have burned it.
Yes.
Well, we have a copy of it.
Oh, you do? Oh, because you have all the beachcombers?
Not all of them, but we have those that were saved
And
and
then I
came from
passed
several
around-
different sources.
Around some that talked about the shipyard. They were here somewhere. That was interesting.
Well,
Beachcomber
there were
ones?
copies made of one issue that are still around for.
Well, that's kind of sweet. And in this picture, I just died when I found this picture. It's so interesting. All these people, they're so dressed up. The women are carrying flowers. People are eating. It looks like one guy's eating a piece of watermelon. Someone's eating a piece of chocolate cake. And look how they're dressed up. And there are no children there except for my granddad's 3 children. And that was so typical. Granddad wanted us to see everything. And so, who knows what they were looking at? Who took that picture?
And where are they?
Where were they?
And why didn't they write?
And then this is the 3, but then Tom died right before his 4th birthday. He had measles, the complications and stuff.
Could I interject something?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Just very quickly, right on the back of your picture, in pencil,
Yes.
on the margin.
Oh, right.
If you use ballpoint pen, it will bleed through. So
Yeah.
that's, and some pencils won't work on some paper, but ballpoint
On the margin, that's good.
or Sharpie, and always get it on the margin so it doesn't bleed through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Family
because I've
picture,
been using
formal
Sharpie.
family photo.
Oh yeah, this was funny in the tape. They said that my grandmother always called her family the 2 batches because we had Dad and Aunt Sylvia, and then she had Uncle Dick and Aunt Mary. And the 2 girls, Aunt Sylvia, the firstborn, and Aunt Mary, the lastborn, were 15 years apart in age. So she called them the 2 batches. So those were the first 3, and then that was Uncle Dick and Aunt Mary.
Is that a bow in her hair?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great big bow.
Always wore a bow. Okay, and that's Uncle Dick, who had screaming red hair, and Aunt Mary, who taught in Anacortes for
High school, yeah.
high school.
You might tell them that Dick's vision was not very good. And
Oh yeah, he needed glasses.
So tell what happened.
But they didn't know he needed glasses until he was like 13 or 11. And when he got glasses, he looked in the window at the grocery store and said, "There are cans on those shelves, and there are leaves on those trees."
Oh.
Isn't that amazing?
So
And
I'll
we
see
don't
this
know,
picture later.
this is a family by a car, but we don't know whose car it was.
Oh yeah, I put these 4, there are 4 pictures, and the car is interesting, and I know that's my grandmother, and I know that's our dad, Stappy, and then that's Uncle Dick. So remember, Dick and Stappy were 9 years apart. So, but look at where, look at that, look at where they're on the sand, and there's someone's building a structure there.
Could that be down at the boat yard?
At the shipyard, maybe.
Shipyard?
We don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe.
I'm going to give those
Nobody
clues to
wrote on the
research.
back of those pictures.
And I thought that doesn't really have anything to do with Guemes, except Guemes is in the background.
Oh, here, Williamson? Oh, okay. Keep
So then
going,
the
go
next one is
fast.
just Uncle Dick riding down the sidewalk on his scooter.
A sidewalk made out of boards.
Yeah, and too bad it's not colored because he had screaming red flame hair. What did Grandma say about when someone says, "Oh, my child has reddish hair"? And Grandma said,
Family photo, family
Once in the
portrait.
hospital, when the baby was little, I always thought the red hair would be so nice. And Mom said, "You don't know." Oh, I said, "In a bright light, you know, it's red. You don't have to look for the bright light." She said, "It's red or it's not red."
and we think her father also had red hair. So
Yes,
she
he
was
did.
thrilled to get a little redheaded guy.
This is Mary Stapp and Charles Stapp. Then this was the seniors, and my mom was Mary Stapp Jr. My dad was Charles Stapp Jr. And then his sister was Mary Stapp. So
3 Mary Stapps.
There were some complications.
Yes.
So we called Mom, everybody called Mom Mary Mac, because her last name is McAdams. And Aunt Mary was Mary A. So we figured it out. Didn't you have to do something didn't you have to correct somebody at the...
Pictures, it's so fascinating. You can type in anybody's name or address and all this stuff will come up. But there's this one little part when there's a picture and it says send feedback. So if you look at a picture and it's misidentified or you know something more about it than's written, you can email that to them. And they'll research it and add it or not. It's just an amazing, amazing group of pictures.
This is in 1921, it was talking about those lots, the Alverson lots along North Beach, 50 feet wide and 400 feet deep. And the road went along the front of those houses, and it didn't come up to where it is now until Billy Everett's yard. So, and you can see that road as it comes up from Sylvia's to Billy's, but there's so much erosion now, you can't imagine that a road ever fit in front of it.
You can't imagine.
We used to have picnics, remember picnics on North Beach? And before the salmon barbecue maybe?
Well, they
Huge-
used to just love having it.
Huge long tables between where the bottom of the stairs were. There was tons of room before you got to the beach.
Oh, I think this was summertime, of course,
Yeah,
when they
yeah.
came over. And once
Oh, yeah.
Mom told me that they stayed until their clothes were all dirty and their food had run out. And then they would go back to town.
And of course,
But they loved being on Guemes. They swam and played and
Grandma didn't like being on the beach.
No, she
She
said
liked
you
being
got
in
sand
the
your
house,
shoes.
not on the beach. But they camped on the beach first.
Didn't they buy it for $25?
Yeah, I
Tell
think,
the story about how Dad got his.
well, all of the businessmen
Granddad.
in town bought these 50-foot lots, and I think they were $35 or $50, $1 a front foot. And Pete Douglas, who was a pharmacist, stopped my granddad on the street one day and said, I bought a lot on Guemes, but my wife doesn't like to go over there, so do you want to buy it? And it was like $35 or $40 or something.
$35.
And that's my grandmother on the beach walking to her camp, and if I zoomed in you would see clothes hanging on the line right here.
And Dad said in the tape that there weren't any homes up on the bluff the way there are now. He said everything happened down on the beach. He said it was a jungle back there. And so the road went along the beach. It went between the water and where the tents were. They stayed in tents. And then this is...
But this is the house that my grandparents started building. There was a cedar stump at that corner and a big rock at this corner. And it was a tent platform at first. Then they would put a wall up, and then a kitchen, and then a bedroom, and a there wasn't a bathroom in 1946 when you came.
No,
There was
it
an
was
outhouse.
And the strange thing was when they tore the old house down to build Sylvia's new house, they were amazed what that house had sat on.
Yeah.
All of these
Cedar stumps and rocks.
that it
So
was
this is a
like
picture of,
rock
is this
or
36 when the concrete steps were put in?
32. Yeah.
32?
There were some pictures when the steps were wooden, and then in the tape, Dad said that at one point there were just switchbacks to get down to the beach too.
And then this talks about when the shipyards, they were built in 1917
17.
and torn down
23.
in 23 after the war, and everybody on North Beach, well, everybody on the island used that lumber to build their houses. And I think some of the windows are in my little house are from that shipyard. My yellow windows, they used to be in my granddad's house.
Marv can tell us about that too.
Do you have wood from the shipyards in your house?
In the barn.
Oh, in the barn? Cool.
What you can see is these wind whistling through, and then they eventually put shakes up, shakes or shingles or whatever. Yeah.
So we'll go fast on these. These are just different views of the house that my grandparents built, and then tore down in 1973 when Aunt Sylvia moved out from Philadelphia to spend the rest of her life on Guemes Island. She came home. Those two windows are in my house at Guemes now. I painted them. I left them yellow. Grandma and Granddad. Inside the house, the walls are made out of...
Yeah, in the diary it said, Charles finished sealing the cottage with plywood, so the walls inside were plywood.
big sheets of plywood with little strips of wood in between, and now that's in my little cabin. And one of the 4x8 sheets at $1.29.
Really nice stuff.
Yeah, it is really nice. No knots. That's my little house. And that's Aunt Mary with a rifle.
Well, I put that one in just so you could see some of the other cabins.
So that's Barney's house, and then Trafton's, and then Cartwright's is the next one. It'd
Those
be
were the
really
original
cool if
ones.
these are on the big screen.
And someday I'm going to research who the original owners of all those properties were, because some of them have changed hands several times.
And this is a house to the north of that beach that the Everetts built. That
Next
was,
door to Aunt Sylvia's house.
that was grandmother Everett. So I think we're almost done.
And that was torn down in the 80s, and now 2 of the 50-foot lots are just empty, and it's a great.
It's a great place for us to rest.
And this picture shows Steve's house and Steve's boathouse. Oh, you went past it, didn't you?
I don't know, but we have to go fast. Oh yeah, that's Steve's boathouse.
Oh, yeah.
Right there.
And the reason I put that one in is because Dad and Uncle Dick talked about Ray Nazier. Did you guys know the Naziers, Tony and Ray Nazier? Well, Ray was a ham operator, and Dad and Uncle Dick would rattle off his number, whatever.
That's
And,
where his
yeah, and he had a little
operation was.
shack on the beach where he had his ham operator.
And this is a Tony Nazier built house. It's on, I think it's where McCracken's live now, and then there's also a little tree house that Tony Nazier and maybe Charlie Yulberg built. That also, that little log house is someplace on North.
And there was a swing, and remember Steve told us last month, he said Mrs. Nazier was mean, didn't like kids. And I remember that same thing. We'd go over there, and it was such an interesting place to go. There was a fish pond, you know, with fish in it, and there were little things all over the place, and she'd chase us away sometimes. Maybe she didn't want us to fall in the fish pond, which I think Sal did one time.
This is Charlie Yulberg, who lived where Olive McFettridge's house was. And he was a boat builder. And a real good friend of my aunts and uncles. That is also his picture.
You might tell the story about Charlie's background. I thought that was
Oh yeah, he was Lithuanian, and when he was 16, his mom had 10 kids and couldn't take care of them, so he went out on a ship, and then years later he went back home and knocked on the door, and she didn't recognize him, so he left. Came to Guemes. He never went back. That's sad. And that's Mita Wicker sitting on her porch. Mita, you remember if you were here last week, took care of Steve most of his life. And I don't know who all these people are.
Oh, I just put that in because there was a story about Granddad and the guys going over to Jack Island to get those stepping stones. And that was just a picture of the stepping stones. And there was a funny story that they loaded the rowboat too full one time and sunk.
My Aunt Mary's smoking a cigarette. Horrors.
Oh, I put that one in because the planters, Tony used to make all kinds of things out of bark. Bye, Louis, thanks.
Thank you.
And I think Tony probably made those planters for my grandmother. He could do anything.
And this 1918 or 1919 car was made into a truck. And my dad's favorite part about it was to get the window up, you just had this lever and you pushed it up. To get it down, you just pushed the lever down. He thought that was way better than rolling or pushing a button. And that's my dad.
Let me say another thing about the car. Because Dad called it an overland sedan converted to a pickup for getting supplies between Guemes and Anacortes. It cost 35 cents to get it over on the ferry. Dad thought it was an 1918 or 19 model car, whatever kind it, overland sedan.
Yeah.
Well,
But this was
Willie's Overland.
Oh.
Yeah, same people that made Jeeps.
This is a school party that Uncle Dick and
But I'm not done! So, but anyway, I think think that picture was taken in like 1930. But in the register that my grandmother wrote, she says, we had Sackett's old worn-out grocery truck for our use during the summer. It was by far the hit of the beach. The youngsters scampered up the beach from every direction when they heard the noisy thing start. Stappy nicknamed it Hedda Gobbler. And I don't know if it's the same car, or a truck or whatever, but a worn-out old grocery truck.
Okay, are we done?
Okay, and then I put that picture in because it showed before. Grandmother loved gatherings of people. She liked to cook for them. So this was like Uncle Dick's class from school when he turned maybe 10 years old. He had a summer birthday. And I just showed it to Louis because I think Louis can figure out who some of those people were. His mom was a friend of Uncle Dick's. And it showed the wooden steps in that picture too, behind.
Vindovia Island with barely any trees because of a big fire that hit years and years ago.
And that was one of the swimming rafts. They said that they'd come over every spring vacation and
Build a raft.
find logs on the beach and build a raft
Every
for the summer.
kid along there had a raft, and but they never learned how to swim. Aunt Mary nor Uncle Dick knew how to swim.
Shallow water.
I went swimming 2 days ago on North Beach. Joan Petrick and I went swimming. This is my dad standing like this with all the neighbors under his arms, and notice their cute outfit. I love that picture. Okay. Aunt Sylvia, suave as always, on the beach.
Probably had her nails done.
Probably. She was.
Even in the nursing home, she had her nails.
And they built bunkhouses on the beach then, and this one is still there. Rick Petrick lifted it up and put a new concrete foundation under it. But this one, we're going to take the logs and use them for firewood. So we hauled them up to the top of the bank, and somebody threw one down and it just exploded. It was so full of powder puff needles. It was just, that's our fancy. And that's the whole kick and caboodle except for gin and things.
Oh yeah, that was taken in '53, and we still had 2 more grandchildren coming.
So, a lot of fun on the beach.
Oh, the reason I put that picture in because it also showed the Everett's house again, and you can kind of see the slope as it went up. Kind of, if you look close, you can kind of see.
You can see it better if you walk down there
today. Because the road along the
today.
beach, then it went up at Everett's.
That's how I remember my grandmother. She always had an apron on and a dress. And nylon. And
high heels.
And she hated going to the beach. Hated it. But she went. My granddad cooking his salmon in a pit on the beach. He would dig a pit, make a fire, have big rocks.
Seaweed.
Seaweed. My grandmother would sew the salmon into a pillowcase, and then more seaweed on top, and then fill it up with the sand and gravel, and then build another fire on top.
Wow.
Way easier to barbecue salmon. Way easier. Aunt Sylvia with crabs.
Like 50 of them.
Yeah. Aunt Mary. I was her favorite.
She was cleaning clams in that one.
Oh, that's right. And she talked about going to Jack Island one day with Tony and Uncle Dick and somebody else.
Ray, maybe. Ray Nation.
And catching 157 trout. Like, 50 the first outing, and then and then everybody on the beach had a fiesta.
She said Tony smoked him that day, and then the next day everybody came.
This is Wick, Mita's husband, and he was just everything that anybody ever wrote about him. He was just the coolest guy. I only remember him in that little log cabin in bed, because he had emphysema or something, heart condition or something. But he was still a gentle guy.
But can you imagine pulling a fish that big into a canoe? That's huge.
And this is my mom's dad from Memphis, Tennessee, and he came out here and went fishing and caught that big fish. At about made him a happy man. And then who's this? Who's this guy?
I don't know. That was a picture, and I thought, well, that's weird. And on the back of it, it said, "To my dear friend, Postmaster Stapp," and I have the guy's name.
Louis will know.
Yeah, Louis will know who it is.
Digging clams. on the beach, up to your elbows. That might be Annie Marchand. Yeah, check the outfit. She probably has, well, maybe not nylons. And that's where we would have big,
Feast.
See, that's where the road was, and in front of those little cabins, and now the bank is there.
yeah, now it's sand. Okay, so these are, oh, and then in the back of, across the road where now my mom and dad built in 1961, this was the pump house, and they had that tank on top because it was gravity feed down to the house on the beach, and it's still the same well. Yeah.
To serve both houses, so we're never going to be able to sell.
Yeah, and my brother helping dig the foundation for that house in the 60s. He was a hippie. And then house pictures. And sorry.
Well, I would like to say something.
Good, okay,
This
I think
was
we're
a
done.
fun family to grow up in. I didn't grow up with them. I came from Tennessee in '46. But Stappy had told me during the war, where I met him, that all of these things happened and how much fun they were. And so I came in July to see it, and it was just as he had said, and I just wouldn't have lived anywhere else.
So they met in April in a train station. Mom comes out in July to meet the family, and they got married in October.
Such a hussy. So this is the 4 Stapp siblings on the beach in
38.
1938, and then again in Aunt Sylvia's little house, 60 something, and then again with the spouses.
In 2000.
I have 14 of these. No, I'm just kidding.
Keep going.
And then this is the last one. Oh, this is Aunt Mary had Stapp LLC shirts made for us. She inherited that house, the beach house, from her grandparents. She was the youngest. Her parents, our grandparents, and she made it into a limited liability company. So we don't really own it. We take care of it. We have work parties. And we share, in the summertime, everybody gets 2 weeks. Me and my 7 cousins. And now Sue's son has finally,
Yeah, we're trying to get the next generation to buy
the
in.
next generation's not really coming, stepping.
I don't have any money.
So we all have Stapp t-shirts. Make a raisin pie for tonight. But I don't know how, I don't make pie, so.
Always have.
You could have made pie. She did always have
She
pie.
always had them, and
That's
she
maybe
would,
why I don't like it.
you know, if you just wandered by close enough, she'd say, "There's a pie," and it was always really good pie. It was great.
And I used to think, when I was little, I thought, raisin pie, that sounds horrible. But I think, back then, you couldn't get fresh stuff, and so she would use raisins to make a pie, just so she'd have a pie to serve to people.
And there wasn't a freezer to put
Right.
rhubarb in.
And when the milkman came, and the mailman, they'd always come in and chat with Granddad and have a piece of pie.
What was the milkman's name, Mr. Legg?
He was the
Or
bread man.
bread man?
He was
Byron.
Byron
Legg.
He brought the bread, and then the milkman.
No, he was the milkman also.
Oh, he was?
Oh, he was?
He did
Oh, I thought there were 2 different guys.
Yeah, there
Byron
are
Legg.
2. Did I miss? I remember.
Byron Legg was the milkman.
Oh, was it white?
Who was the guy who played opera?
But Aunt Mary on the tape, she said, but big deal, so did the Schultzes, so did everybody else who lived here, So,
Yeah, Mary was my PE teacher.
was she?
Yeah.
The road that Al was talking about, Marvin was talking about, that's still in the front yard
Really?
of our house. That was the road there, and you can see, in fact, there's a little hump of dirt between our house and the beach, and that's where they pushed that back up when they built the road. But the road is right there. We walk across it every day.
Who built it?
I don't know. I was a little kid, and that's how you access
Should
it.
have that. Well, it's in the paperwork that we'll send, but Uncle Dick, his summer job was to row from where Stapp's house is down to the corner where the Reinhardt, there was a dairy farm there where Ashbacks owned, and he got 13 cents a quart to deliver the milk, and he figured that at the end of that summer, he didn't know who had the rest of the money in the world, but he figured he had most of it. I can't remember how much he made, but he was
$13. He made $13
yeah,
a week.
maybe he got 3 cents a quart and had $13 by the end of the summer and was feeling pretty flush. Yeah.
In 1954, there was 27 cans of milk.
Yeah, Mary talked about there was a cart that moved the,
There was
well,
no
1954,
cart. There was no cart.
yeah.
They were packed there, and the ferry crew member
Yeah.
picked that up, and Melvin Larson. That was
How big were they? Like,
like
Milk cans.
5-gallon cans.
5 gallons?
40 pounds.
Yeah.
So Aunt Mary talked about the horse-drawn cart that the horses would take the milk over every day.
Well,
And
there was no milk cart when I saw it.
no,
It was
indeed,
just
yeah.
packing this thing on. Holy
I wonder if the
God.
ferry crew would do that now,
Nobody.
or it might not be part of their.
so how did the milk get to the ferry though?
People packed it down there.
They're 10 gallons.
That was before the grade A standards went in place. And anybody could milk and put things there.
How many dairies were there on the island?
Oh, I don't know. Marvin, help me.
I can't hear, so
But
he said they were-
There was probably
37 before they got, guy come over here and got milk started.
In 37?
Pardon?
In 1937, they what?
About 37.
They started getting milk.
Oh, milk started instead of just
Instead of
cream.
just cream. Yeah.
Got it.
Well, if
Well-
anybody really wants